Welcome back to Storytime with Quefish. Effortless Intimacy, Chapter 6. A delicious flashback for a delectable present. Aziraphale was in exceptional spirits in the weeks that followed. He had taken to napping on Crowley's lap every time he was offered. The third time it was suggested, the question was barely finished before he was gazing up at Crowley, head in his lap. His focus was dedicated to the pleasure of the experience, as though the simple act of falling asleep was the most delicate dessert. He found himself watching Crowley's hands when they were talking, knowing exactly how exquisite they felt in his hair. Aziraphale was well aware that his enjoyment of more human activities was looked down on by his former superiors. Hedonism was a sin, of course, but Aziraphale would argue that it was definitely more harmless than others. He couldn't understand why thoroughly enjoying something that was in fact meant to be thoroughly enjoyed would be wrong. Shouldn't effort be rewarded? Aziraphale had just settled in on what was agreed as his side of the sofa with a book and a glass of wine. He wasn't expecting Crowley. Technically, he never expected him, unless a plan had been made. He was always hopeful, but expectations led to disappointment, and Aziraphale preferred to think positively whenever possible. Aziraphale tried very hard not to jump joyfully when he heard the door open. Since he knew he had locked it, there was only one person who could have simply opened it. "Aziraphale? You'd better not be too comfortable." Crowley came in, large and loud, a smile on his face. He plopped down right next to him and pulled off his sunglasses, smirking. "Kiss me, Angel." Aziraphale had simply enjoyed watching the demon's entrance to the back room. He could be so vivacious when the mood struck him, and when it did, he was beauty in motion. He heard the gentle command and smiled. "If you insist, my dear." He placed his palm on Crowley's cheek as he leaned in. He closed his eyes, inhaling the scent he almost craved now, before stopping. Confused, he looked up into Crowley's eyes. "What? How?" Crowley's smirk turned into a wide grin as he repeated himself. "Kiss me, Angel." He looked into Aziraphale's wide, questioning eyes and saw that he seemed frozen. Knowing that he may get seriously tutted for it, he turned on the temptation. His body leaned in just enough, but stopped so that it would have to be Aziraphale who closed the gap. "Aziraphale, do you remember that smell? The flavors? So long ago. You sat on a dirt floor in a poor man's rented room. It was the first time we ate together. It wasn't planned. All those sweet spices. You were almost purring. It bordered obscene. Taste it again. All you have to do is kiss me, Angel." There was a slight twinge of guilt as he spoke, but Crowley brushed it away. He knew he wasn't hurting Aziraphale, not even forcing him to do anything, more reminding him that he wanted something. They had both needed shelter. It was pure coincidence that they ended up in the same place. The man spoke a language that they hadn't learned yet, and shared his meal with them. At the end of the meal, after some sweetened water, the man looked positively joyous as he had brought out something small, wrapped carefully. It was the size of a bread, but obviously held great importance to him. He carefully put it close to the fire and let it warm. Crowley, as he was known at the time, and Aziraphale hadn't spoken much during the meal. The angel had shushed the demon, thinking how rude it would have been to hold a conversation while the man sheltering them couldn't join in or understand them. Crowley could see his point, even if it was frustrating. He wasn't used to keeping his tongue if he wanted to talk, but it seemed important to the angel, and for some reason, he wanted to please the angel. It wasn't fondness or affection, but it was shared history and understanding. He had no wish to lose that. The man had been carefully turning his prize, and after a short time carefully pulled the package from the fire. He began unwrapping it, and an amazing fragrance began wafting through the room. It was surprisingly sweet, yet there was a bitterness underlying it that made it smell even better. He was actually looking forward to tasting this, and he wasn't much on using food for anything other than keeping up his corporation's needs. The digestive anatomy was definitely not human, as it was a bit incomplete, but the nutrients were still necessary, so he ate. This was going to be a different experience, and if the look on Aziraphale's face was any indication, it appeared it would be new for both of them. Aziraphale's mouth was parted, inhaling the aroma deeply, eyes focused. It looked like a simple bread round, but the scent was like nothing he'd ever encountered. As the last wrapping came off, he could see the steam escaping from nooks and crannies in the round, and inhaling again, felt his mouth start to water. He looked to Crawley, who seemed just as entranced by this new food. The man gestured in such a way to indicate that this was very special, that his family made it, and no one else did. The angel believed that wholly. He had been to many places, and this was completely unique. The man broke off a few pieces and handed one to each, held one to himself, and carefully rewrapped the round, placing it to the side. They brought the bread up to their noses and took in the smell again. Crawley slowly began eating it, knowing that eating it quickly would likely be an insult. He may be a demon, but you don't insult the hand that is feeding you something amazing. However, if he was eating slowly, Aziraphale was barely eating at all. He broke off small pieces, barely the size of a seed, and would let each morsel fully dissolve before swallowing. Crawley's instincts told him that something rather significant was happening, something that changed everything, and he started hanging on every detail. He studied the man's look and style of dress, different ornaments that he had with his belongings, colors. He took notice of what he had fed them before. He saw the look of pleasure on the man's face at having shared something so precious, seeing how appreciated it was. But he mainly watched Aziraphale. The angel looked rapturous. His eyes closed as he brought each nibble into his mouth, his tongue coming just to his lip as his fingers drew near. The sounds the angel was making were mesmerizing on their own. Listening to Aziraphale almost made Crawley believe that his taste buds must have been taken away when he fell, since he was not getting the same experience. Aziraphale couldn't help it anymore. He started talking, trying to tell the man how delicious the bread was, asking how to make it, thanking him profusely, and in between each exclamation he would return to the bread for a few more morsels before starting to speak again. When the portion was gone, Crawley saw the look on the angel's face, obviously wanting more, but knowing how rude it would be to ask. The man offered them some soft blankets to sleep on, and in the morning gave them a few fruits, some more sweet water, and they went on their way. Aziraphale turned to the demon. I think that I may never know the same joy as I did with that bread. I have never tasted anything even close to it. And you know he wasn't local, so I would have no idea where to even ask to get more. He sighed. Well, memories last longer than food, but I do hope I come across them again. The angel straightened his posture even further than usual and leveled his gaze on the demon. Now then, Crawley. I can't imagine how difficult it must have been, being a demon, but your exercise and restraint last night is appreciated. Peace was kept. However, this is where we part. Crawley smirked. Indeed it is, Angel. See you around. Crawley had occasionally brought up that memory and tried to find the man's family, or anyone who may have had information. He would get leads, but they never quite panned out. He had a few humans who he also had looking. He had all but given up a few hundred years ago. He still wanted it, but it was so unlikely now that he lost touch with his contacts. Out of nowhere, a few days ago, he had received an odd message, a written letter. He couldn't read the language, but he recognized his name, so it wasn't a mistake. However, he then remembered his old hunt and immediately left to see if it could possibly be true. Against all odds, the small family still existed, still made the bread from homegrown ingredients, still wouldn't share the recipe or sell the bread at a market. He approached them, quite close to begging to purchase even a single round from them. He could have simply tempted or wiled them into it, but it felt wrong somehow. As hard as this family worked to keep it safe, and he also didn't want to cheapen the gift he was about to be able to give. He performed a small blessing for them, knowing it was needed, and in appreciation they agreed that the Crowley family line would always be welcome in their home. Of course it would always be him, but they didn't need to know that. Crowley had warmed and eaten a small piece before entering the bookshop to make sure it was fresh on his lips. It was every bit as good as he remembered, which meant that his angel was about to have a very good night indeed. All you have to do is kiss me, angel. Aziraphale's eyes had become darker as the temptation wove itself around him. He was so afraid. What if it wasn't the same, and it tainted the memory that he hadn't thought of in centuries, but now recalled with clarity? The angel finally submitted himself to the temptation, allowing it to pull him in, and he closed the space between them to bring their lips together. His tongue stole out and lightly touched the demon's lips, and a deep sound of want accompanied even that small hint of flavor as the angel's eyes rolled closed. He found himself leaning even further, turning fully toward this very satisfied demon, bringing his knee onto the sofa to better leverage himself. His hand never left Crowley's cheek, but now the other was buried in his hair, gripping tightly to move the demon's head to the angle that best suited him. His tongue came out firmly, chasing the taste of the delicacy he had so enjoyed into Crowley's mouth, tracing his teeth, breathing in the scent. The unique spices bloomed in his memory, now coupled with the slightly dark taste that surrounded Crowley, and he made a sound of bliss that Crowley would have suggested be illegal, had he been able to think at all. He was being consumed, mouth first, shivers traveling over his skin as Aziraphale continued to grip his hair and indulge in kissing him. Barely could be called a kiss anymore. Crowley almost felt like food. He had kept his arm across the couch and the other was on his lap, his hands in fists to keep from reaching out. He wanted Aziraphale to enjoy every moment of this tease before the main course. Oh, Crowley. Is that really? Aziraphale had broken away just far enough to speak. He had no idea why this particular bread was so irresistible, a visceral experience. He hadn't opened his eyes yet, but felt Crowley nod. How? Not important, Angel. I found it. Went out and brought some home. I've picked up a wine that should go well with it. Would you like to come out, lie under the stars, and share with me? Aziraphale sat back onto the leg that he didn't remember kneeling on, looking at Crowley, and tears came to his eyes. How long ago had it been, and his demon remembered how he had enjoyed it. How long Crowley must have worked to find it, to bring it to him. A few tears escaped as he smiled. My dear, I want nothing more in this world right now than to follow wherever you would take me for this dessert. Crowley reached up and wiped the tears away, smiling. He stood up and put out his hand, bringing Aziraphale to his feet. Demon lips kissed angel hands. An angel embraced a demon, and the two made their way out of the bookshop. Aziraphale snapped the door, locked behind them. Crowley raised an eyebrow and mused. What was that about frivolous miracles, Aziraphale? My dear, would you like to stand here and talk about my use of magic, or would you like to go on a delectable picnic? Crowley couldn't snap the Bentley's doors open and get behind the wheel fast enough, and within moments, they were on their way. And that's the end of chapter 6. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you whenever I read something next.